There are places in America where time didn't exactly stop. It just never felt the need to move on. Drive into these towns, and something feels slightly off. The storefronts look untouched. The streets grow quiet after sunset, not abandoned, just unchanged. In some of these places, locals still joke that it's 1974, and there's something to that. 1974 was the year the oil embargo reshaped daily life across America. The year Watergate closed out an era. The year something in the national rhythm shifted, and in certain corners of the country, that rhythm simply never changed back. Tonight, we're visiting 10 of them. Number 10, Buffalo, Wyoming. Buffalo doesn't announce itself in a hurry. Driving in along Highway 16, the landscape opens wide, low hills, long shadows, and a main street that feels quietly familiar, even if you've never been here before. The buildings along Main Street haven't changed much in decades. Brick storefronts still carry faded signage, and the Occidental Hotel, a landmark since the 1880s, still anchors the corner where travelers have always expected it. Nothing looks abandoned. Nothing looks new either. In the 1970s, Buffalo was a steady stop for ranchers, truck drivers, and families crossing the American West. And somehow, the rhythm of that era never fully disappeared. Shops close early, conversations linger longer, and the pace of life still follows daylight more than digital clocks. It's not that Buffalo is frozen in time, people live and work here like anywhere else. But walk these streets after sunset, and it's easy to imagine a passing car from 1974 pulling up to the curb, its radio playing softly through the open window. Here, the past doesn't feel distant. It just feels normal. Number 9, Helper, Utah. Helper sits quietly along an old stretch of railroad that once carried coal, workers, and constant movement through the mountains of eastern Utah. Today, the trains still pass by, but the urgency that built this town feels long gone. At first glance, Helper looks like many small western towns. A wide main street, brick buildings from another era, and storefront windows that seem unchanged for generations. But stay a little longer, and the stillness becomes noticeable. Traffic is light. Conversations drift slowly through cafe doors. Even the air feels unhurried. In the early 1970s, Helper was alive with shift changes and railroad schedules. Miners filled diners before dawn, and neon signs stayed lit late into the evening. When coal declined and highways redirected travelers elsewhere, the town didn't disappear, it simply grew quieter. Many of the same buildings remain, carrying signs painted decades ago, their colors softened by desert sun and time. Nothing here feels staged or preserved for visitors. Life just continued at a slower pace. Walking down Main Street today, it's easy to feel as if the clock didn't stop, it just stopped racing. In Helper, time didn't leave. It learned how to wait. Number 8, Lubec, Maine. At the far eastern edge of the United States, where the country meets the Atlantic before anywhere else, sits the small fishing town of Lubec, Maine. It feels less like a destination and more like the end of the road. Weathered docks stretch into cold gray water, and fishing boats rock gently against wooden piers that have looked much the same for decades. Salt air moves slowly through town, carrying the sound of gulls and distant waves instead of traffic. In the 1970s, Lubec's rhythm was shaped by tides and lobster seasons rather than calendars. Families worked the same waters their parents had known, and daily life followed routines that changed little from year to year. Unlike many coastal towns, modernization never arrived all at once. It simply passed by. The storefronts remain modest, the streets quiet, and even the streetlights feel softer here, as if adjusted for another era. There are no crowds rushing between attractions, no sense of urgency pushing the town forward. Standing along the harbor at dusk, it's easy to imagine the scene unchanged since 1974. The same boats, the same horizon, the same slow conversation carried by the wind. In Lubec, time doesn't feel preserved. It feels gently untouched. Number 7, Wallace, Idaho. Wallace isn't just old, it's officially protected from becoming anything else. Nestled in the mountains of northern Idaho, this former silver mining town carries a rare distinction. Nearly the entire downtown is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In the 1970s, when plans for a major interstate threatened to cut through the heart of the city, residents pushed back. The solution? Preserve it all. So the brick facades stayed. The narrow storefronts remained. Even the scale of the streets feels untouched by modern expansion. Walking through downtown Wallace today, you won't find glass towers or oversized signage. You'll find hand-painted letters, vintage hotel fronts, and bars that look like they've poured the same drinks for half a century. In 1974, this was a hard-working mining town adjusting to economic shifts. Today, people still live and work here, but the bones of that decade remain visible everywhere you look. The mountains loom close, quiet, and steady, as if guarding the past from unnecessary updates. In Wallace, time didn't slip away. It was written into the town's survival. Number 6. Ocracoke, North Carolina. Reaching Ocracoke, North Carolina takes intention. There are no bridges connecting it directly to the mainland, only ferries crossing open water, moving at a pace that feels deliberately unhurried. By the time you arrive, the world already feels different. Narrow roads wind past small homes shaded by live oaks, bicycles outnumber cars, and the absence of traffic lights makes the island seem quietly detached from modern routines. In the 1970s, Ocracoke was known as a hidden coastal escape, a place where fishermen, families, and wandering travelers shared the same slow rhythm shaped by tides and weather. Decades later, much of that rhythm remains. Shops open with the morning light, conversations happen on porches, and evenings settle gently over the harbor without urgency. Nothing here feels frozen or staged. Life simply moves according to older patterns, the kind that existed long before constant connectivity and crowded coastlines. Standing near the docks at sunset, with boats rocking softly against their lines, it becomes easy to lose track of the present year altogether. On Ocracoke, time isn't held back by history. It's separated by water. Number 5. Eagle Harbor, Michigan. In winter, snow buries the road signs here. For weeks at a time, the world feels very far away. Far out on Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, where Lake Superior stretches endlessly toward the horizon, sits the small harbor town of Eagle Harbor. Reaching it requires miles of winding road through forest and shoreline, the kind of drive where towns grow farther apart and silence becomes noticeable. A century ago, this region thrived on copper mining. By the 1970s, most of that industry had already faded, leaving behind a community that adjusted not by rebuilding, but by slowing down. The harbor remained, the general store stayed open, and daily life settled into a quieter rhythm shaped more by seasons than by growth. Wooden buildings face the water much as they did decades ago, their paint softened by harsh winters and lake winds. Old pickup trucks sit outside homes that have passed through generations, and the small lighthouse still watches over a shoreline that rarely feels crowded. There's no sense of reinvention here, only continuity. Summers arrive gently, winters linger long, and the passage of time feels measured in snowfall and thaw rather than years. Standing along the rocky shore, listening to waves roll in from Canada across the cold lake, it's easy to imagine that very little has changed since 1974. In Eagle Harbor, time doesn't rush forward. It moves with the seasons. Number 4, Cairo, Illinois. Not every town on this list held on the same way. At the southernmost tip of Illinois, where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi, sits the town of Cairo, once one of the most important river ports in America. In the early 20th century, Cairo was busy and ambitious. By the 1970s, however, much of that momentum had already faded. Industries declined, families moved away, and storefronts began to close, one by one. Unlike towns that reinvented themselves, Cairo simply grew quieter. Today, walking down its wide streets feels different from the towns we've seen so far. The buildings are still there, tall brick facades, old theaters, historic homes, but many stand empty. Windows reflect the sky instead of display lights. Signs remain in place long after the businesses behind them disappeared. In 1974, this was a town adjusting to change. Decades later, that adjustment still seems unfinished. The river flows steadily past, as it always has, but the sense of urgency that once defined Cairo never returned. Here, time didn't gently slow. It stalled and never fully restarted. Number 3. Livingston, Montana. Livingston, Montana sits at the edge of wide skies and open country, a town shaped more by work than by nostalgia. Trains still pass through regularly, their sound echoing across streets that look much as they did decades ago. Unlike places preserved for tourism, Livingston never tried to freeze itself in time. It simply kept going. Old brick buildings line Park Street and neon beer signs, some first lit in the early 1970s, still glow inside bars where railroad workers once ended long shifts. In the 1970s, ranchers and train crews filled these sidewalks daily. Today, pickup trucks still park in the same angled spots along the curb, and diners serve breakfast in rooms that haven't changed their layout in generations. The Absaroka Range rises behind town, steady and unmoved, as if reminding Livingston that not everything needs updating. Nothing here feels staged or restored to look historic. The town wears its age naturally, shaped by decades of ordinary life rather than preservation plans. As dusk settles and the neon hum returns to the windows along Main Street, Livingston doesn't feel stuck in 1974. It feels like it never stopped working through it. Number 2, Mackinac Island, Michigan. To reach Mackinac Island, you leave your car behind. There are no traffic lights here, no gas stations. In fact, cars have been banned on the island for over a century. The only sounds drifting through the streets are bicycle tires on pavement and the steady rhythm of horse-drawn carriages. By the 1970s, Mackinac had already settled into this slower identity, grand Victorian hotels overlooking the water, old-fashioned ice cream parlors, wooden storefronts that felt untouched by modern redesign. Unlike many towns that evolved with highways and expansion, the island simply kept its distance from it all. Today, that separation is still visible everywhere. Porches wrap around historic homes. Fudge shops line the main street. The harbor fills with boats instead of traffic. Even the pace of conversation seems unhurried, as if shaped by the same routines that defined the place decades ago. It's not a museum, and it's not pretending to be a different era. Life here continues just on its own terms. Walking along the waterfront at sunset, with carriage wheels echoing softly behind you, it becomes easy to forget what year it is. On Mackinac Island, 1974 doesn't feel distant. It feels right on schedule. Number 1, Warren, Pennsylvania. Several viewers mentioned a small town in northern Pennsylvania, saying it still feels like 1974. So we went looking for Warren. Set along the Allegheny River, Warren doesn't stand out at first glance. Tree-lined streets, modest storefronts, and historic buildings sit comfortably within the landscape, unchanged in ways that are easy to overlook until you slow down. During the mid-20th century, this was an oil and manufacturing town built on steady industry and routine. By the 1970s, life here followed familiar patterns. Local shops knew their customers, downtown stayed active after work hours, and change arrived gradually rather than all at once. Today, much of that rhythm remains. The courthouse still anchors the skyline, neon signs glow softly in the evening, and the streets carry a calm that feels older than the present day. Nothing insists on being modern. Nothing tries to recreate the past either. Walking through Warren at dusk, it's easy to understand what those viewers meant. The town doesn't feel preserved, it feels continuous, as if one decade quietly blended into the next without interruption. Here, 1974 was never left behind. It simply kept going,